Someone put out an APB on BPS. It's NES Works episode 168.
Rebuilt exactly to scale under the glass-enclosed dome of Autoworld.
You've taken it to the streets, now it's time to head indoors to the arena. All-Pro Basketball looks pretty familiar, doesn't it? Not to put too fine a point on it, but All-Pro Basketball looks for all the world like a large-scale version of Hoops, the Jalico street pickup game from earlier in 1989. Of course, APB, no, not that APB, involves standard 5-on-5 gameplay rather than 2-on-2. But this game would have been in real trouble before Microsoft established the look and feel legal precedent in 1994. It would have been in trouble, except there was no one to sue. Even though APB has the name Vic Tokai on the label, you know, the Golgo 13 guys, and Hoops was a Jalico jam, both games share a common developer, ICOM. We last saw ICOM as the folks behind the exceptionally cool TurboGrafx launch title The Legendary Axe, and that game was very good. But the Legendary Axe, exceptional a Rygar-like as it may have been, did not properly represent the working bulk of ICOM's early output. You'd think it would, since ICOM was founded by Akio Inoue, formerly of Tekkon, you know, the Rygar guys. But no, somehow that little Japanese studio became the #1 go-to for developing basketball games as the 1980s dissolved into the 90s. They produced 6 basketball titles across 3 different consoles for multiple publishers in just 2 years. And of all those basketball titles, All-Pro Basketball is definitely one of them. It certainly has a different overall flow than Hoops, which kept things small and confined to one half of the court. APB consists of a succession of 4-quarter 5-on-5 games that span the entire court, and its overall tone is professional rather than street. You lose the vibrant backgrounds of the earlier game in favor of boring pro courts for starters. Additionally, all of the athletes look the same outside of their skin and jersey colors. They all have identical stats too, so you lose the individualism of Hoops, where some players moved faster, shot more effectively, or were tall enough to be exceptional defenders. APB lets you select one of 8 teams, each representing a different American city, and each with 12 named players. In practice, none of those players are named or associated with numbers, and there's really zero differentiation between them. So despite appearances, APB applies the same flattening effect to its team organization that we saw in Konami's Double Dribble. I don't think that's a spurious connection to make here, since APB also incorporates the same slam-dunk close-up gimmick that made Double Dribble so memorable. Except here, the players show up in full color. So, you know, it's better. Aside from the color dunks, and the way the gameplay feels like Hoops all the way down to borrowing that game's free throw mechanic, APB may just as well be Double Dribble turned sideways. I suppose that's fine. Double Dribble was very good 2 years earlier, and the court rotation comes with a downside. It actually makes the game kind of annoying to play. Rather than depicting the entire court as a single vertically scrolling space with baskets at the top and bottom, the game only renders the far side of the court. When players cross the half-court line, the screen switches to a reverse shot that turns the forecourt into the backcourt. This means that the current offensive team's basket always appears at the very top of the screen, which makes a certain amount of sense. It probably would have been difficult on NES to render a basket at the bottom of the screen without obscuring the action or using some sort of clumsy visual trick to create the perception of transparency. I don't know that pausing the action to functionally rotate the court makes for a better solution, though. When the ball passes the mid-court line, the action freezes for a couple of seconds for a transition. The screen fades out and then fades back in, and the player's positions are translated to the reverse angle. So if the player with possession of the ball crosses the center line at the far left of the screen, he'll reappear at the far right of the reverse court. Points for working out the logistics of this, I guess, but this only reads on screen because the game places an arrow over the team member with possession in order to track his placement across the transition. This reminds me of a complaint I once heard about the way you could bring up a finger icon to track Cloud Strife's location on some of the busier Final Fantasy VII maps. If you need help finding your character's place on the screen, you kinda messed up your usability. The constant rotation breaks the flow of the action, and it's really disorienting. Not a great way to maintain the energy and excitement of a fast-paced sports game. All-Pro Basketball brings a new perspective and style to 8-bit basketball, but sometimes there's a reason that no one had ever done a thing before. It's not necessarily that no one had thought of doing this, but that they all stepped back and said, that seems like a really bad idea. APB demonstrates the fact that this style of screen switching is in fact a really bad idea in a basketball game. The terrible repetitive music doesn't help, admittedly. Aside from this massive flaw, All-Pro Basketball is pretty okay. I mean, it's like the three-piece suit version of Hoops, so think of it as being like the Amazon League.
We know can dunk, but good fundamentals.
And best of all, it includes an exhibition mode, which means I didn't actually have to play it myself to record all this footage. Thanks, ICOM. Battle chess? That's like a baby game. Here's the real thing. Archon. Yes, a computer classic comes to NES at long last. We still have a while to wait before the Chess Master makes it, but that's okay because Archon is the same thing. Just kidding. Archon only pretends to be chess. In truth, it has less in common with that classic board game than shogi does. This electronic arts classic takes on the appearance of chess, then extrapolates it into a fantasy-themed action game. There are two phases to Archon: the board strategy and the direct encounter action. The board phase looks very much like classic chess, as two armies line up on opposite sides of an 8x8 square grid. The forward row mostly consists of weak little grunts, while more powerful units occupy the back row, flanking the key strategic load bearers. Each side has a different appearance that makes chess's light versus dark pieces more concrete. The light side units on the left have a sort of heroic or good quality to them, with knights, valkyries, and a unicorn facing off against a sorceress's more evil, dark units, such as goblins, trolls, and shapeshifters. As in chess, each of these units has to observe distinct limitations and rules as they move around the board. Some units can only move 2 or 3 spaces, while others can move several more than that. And this is where the distinctions start to come into play to separate Archon from standard chess. Units can move a different number of spaces, but the nature of that movement varies too. A winged unit like a phoenix or shapeshifter moves via flight, while a golem or goblin has to move around on foot. This doesn't come into consideration with every move, but it does put restrictions on ground-based units, and it means that only the rare teleporter units can move unimpeded by foes or other considerations. The board itself looks a little bit different from the standard chess grid, with a handful of specially designated spaces that add further strategic considerations to the game. If players can place units at 5 specific points on the board, the game ends without having to wipe out the other side. Also, certain glowing power points protect units occupying them from magic spells, making them worth seeking out. Yes, magic spells. Archon doesn't have a single leader unit whose capture automatically results in a loss. Instead, the king is replaced by a wizard or a sorceress, a powerful but not indestructible unit who can use their movement turn to cast a spell. These spells include the ability to heal a wounded unit, resurrect a lost unit, or summon special forces to thwart a foe. For example, the sorceress loves to call a water elemental to make the phoenix unit's life miserable. Note that once 2 units meet on the board, the active unit does not simply remove the unit occupying the space that it takes. Archon is very much an attempt to turn the holographic chess game in Star Wars into a video game, because an encounter between 2 units results in an active battle between those 2 units. This takes the form of an arcade-style shootout, kinda like Western Gun or Chisholm Trail. The 2 active units take to a top-down field broken up by various obstacles and attempt to maneuver around, attacking one another, wearing their opponent's health bar down to 0 in order to effect a kill and claim that space, removing that defeated piece from the board. Most units attack with projectiles, which puts the handful of melee-focused units like knights and goblins at a massive disadvantage. But even ranged units are built different and come with their own tactical considerations. Some units move slowly. Some have great offensive power or poor defense. Some have slow projectiles that give the enemy time to evade, or tiny projectiles that can pass through barriers more easily. There are other considerations too, like elemental affinity. That water elemental, again, makes life rough for the flame-based phoenix. And then you have the dark side's shapeshifter, a creature that takes on the appearance and skills of any unit it confronts, though usually with more hit points. Its malleable nature and high endurance makes the shapeshifter the bane of Light's existence. Altogether, it's a pretty cool take on the venerable board game, and it understandably stands as one of the great classics of the early 1980s. Archon originally debuted in 1983 and was one of the key works that helped establish computers as a viable alternative for consoles in the wake of the Atari crash. It also helped secure fledgling publisher Electronic Arts' place and video gaming is the home of innovative ideas attached to the people who created them. The original box art for Archon proudly displayed the names of developers Anne Westphal, John Freeman, and Paul Reich III right below its logo. Archon shipped as one of EA's very first releases, alongside similarly revolutionary, creator-credited works like Danny Bunton's Mule and Bill Budge's Pinball Construction Set. Unfortunately, the NES version feels like it was a long time coming. This port has the distinct feel of a Famicom release from 1986 that took forever to reach the US, even though that's not actually the case. To my knowledge, Archon never shipped in Japan, so its dated feel is just the result of graphics and programming that aren't quite up to snuff for the standard of NES releases in 1989. Even putting aside the lackluster visuals, which smack of FCI's conversion of Ultima Exodus, Archon doesn't play as well as an NES game of this era should. The interface is pretty poor. Trying to select spellcaster actions on the board screen is downright obnoxious, and character movement in combat feels pretty sludgy. You have to press in the direction of an attack while tapping the action button in order to strike a foe. Your unit won't simply fire in the direction they're facing while standing still. There's a cooldown period on actions, which is fine and reasonable, but units feel a little slow to respond and don't fire at diagonals very reliably. Your units also have a tendency to flop around on the field, getting hung up on obstacles or else sliding off of obstacles and instantly being shunted to a different tile, usually putting them in the direct line of fire of an attack you were trying to avoid. I admit that I've never played the original Atari 400 or Apple II versions of Archon, so I can't comment on how much of this was present in the older renditions of the game, but I can say for certain that I'm not a fan of how it works here. Archon seems ripe for a quality of life ROM hack that smooths over these issues and keeps it from feeling like a pre-memory management Famicom release from an inexperienced studio. It absolutely wasn't programmed by an inexperienced studio. The team behind Archon for NES was none other than Bulletproof Software, a seasoned studio with plenty of experience under their belts. Then again, I've played the BPS-developed Tetris for Famicom, and that felt equally clunky and archaic, so maybe that was just their style. Or, Bulletproof had previously published Archon in Japan for PC 8801, back in 1986. So maybe this version was created as if in some sort of temporal stasis, calling it back to that release. See, this is what happens when the sorceress casts that spell that reverses the flow of time. Next time on NES Works, it's a little robo-enchantment under the sea.